Calendar for the day. The first bill on the calendar for the day is House File 1054. The clerk will report the bill.
House File 1054 on the calendar for the day, the first engrossment, an act relating to marriage.
Representative Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I just want to say I'm really happy and proud to be here today. This is a historic day for Minnesota, and it reminds me what we did 20 years ago here when I was a chief author then, and we added those words sexual orientation to the Minnesota Human Rights Act. And that protected our gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender Minnesotans from unlawful discrimination in employment, housing, public services, access to education, access to credit, and public accommodations. The passage of that law had taken 20 years to pass, and the bill that we're proposing today has taken another 20 years. And I just want to say that there's been a lot of discussion that's been going on around Minnesota, especially in the last 2 years, all about what marriage is. More people than I can imagine, thousands of families have been talking about marriage, and we've been talking about marriage as a love and commitment and responsibility that two people can share. In the process of that discussion, many families from all over the state I know came out in support of same-sex couples and the families that they know and love and respect in their own lives, in their own communities. And I know that's true for members here. There are always members here, and many who have told me that you have GLBT family members and understand this issue from that standpoint. And what it really leads to is that in Minnesota, we don't turn our back on our families. I want to share a photo with you. I think the front desk has it. This photo is a personal photo that was taken in June at the Minneapolis Gay Pride Parade, right after we had passed that amendment to the Minnesota Human Rights Act. And I am the person, as you're laying it on your desk, over on the left. I don't have gray hair, so maybe some of the new members might not recognize me, but there I am, next to my partner, who is here or will be here upstairs, and my mother, who has passed about 10 years ago, and my dad, who passed about 2 years ago. And they're not here, of course, in physical body, but I know they're here in spirit. And what I want you to do is to read the sign that they were carrying at that Gay Pride Parade 20 years ago. They carried a sign that said, "Our gay children should have the same rights as our heterosexual children." This is Millie and Burtis Clark from Rock County, and I hope the representative from Rock County recognizes my dad and mom on there. They were very proud that we had passed that law. One of the things my mother did was to write a letter to the Rock County Star-Herald and discuss that bill before it was passed, and got a lot of feedback, which I understand people are getting a lot of feedback about this particular bill. She ended her letter to the Rock County Star-Herald saying, "I believe my daughter is differently blessed." And I always appreciated that about my mom and dad, and again, I know they're here in spirit. So just look at that photo and keep that in mind. And I just want to remark that my family knew firsthand that same-sex couples pay our taxes, we vote, we serve in the military, we take care of our kids, our elders, and we run businesses in Minnesota. We work hard and we contribute to the same Minnesota system as everyone else. So I conclude that same-sex couples should be treated fairly under the law, including having the freedom to marry the person that we love. When we fall in love and decide to commit ourselves to another person, marriage can be part of that whole commitment. And I do think it's become clear that most Minnesotans believe that marriage is a unique promise of love, commitment, responsibility, and fidelity that two people share. That we believe in Minnesota in treating others the way we would want to be treated, and that none of us would want to hold that it is illegal to marry the person we love. Freedom means freedom for everyone. Unfortunately, here in Minnesota, until we pass this law, same-sex couples are still excluded from marriage. We've had a number of polls. In April, the KSTP poll said that 51% of Minnesotans support allowing same-sex couples to marry. And there's some other polls, and we'll be talking about them perhaps as we go along today. And I can just say that Minnesotans from every faith and political background have been urging the legislature to take action this year and include same-sex couples in the freedom to marry. I would say our Minnesota values are clearly not represented by excluding some people from the freedom to marry just because of who we are. So this discussion with many of you has led to today's vote, and it reminds me so much of 20 years ago and some of the discussions we had on the floor here. One of the things that it comes down to eventually, and I've heard many of you say this phrase, is that it's important that we know that it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do today to vote to pass this bill. I do believe it's time to ensure that no Minnesotan is told that it's illegal to marry the person they love. That includes me and many people who you all know and love in your own lives. With that, Mr. Chairman, I want to go through the bill and just section by section let people know what this bill would do. The first section amends the Minnesota Human Rights Act to expand religious freedom. That's the very first thing we do in this bill. Specifically, it ensures the freedom of religious institutions, nonprofit religious corporations, and affiliated educational institutions to refuse to participate in a marriage in which they object on religious grounds. This section allows these religious entities to refuse goods, services, facilities, and accommodations to such marriage ceremonies and celebrations. Very strong. And even before we put this in the bill, you should know that the Minnesota Human Rights Act is the strongest in this regard in terms of protecting religious liberties in the whole country. Section 2 changes Minnesota law to permit marriages between persons regardless of the gender of the spouses. It reaffirms that marriage in Minnesota is a civil contract. That's the heading on the title of the law, a civil contract, and there's going to be an amendment later that makes that even clearer. It leaves previous state law intact regarding the requirements for solemnization of the marriage, presence of two witnesses, licensure. That all stays the same. The next section, Section 3, amends Minnesota law to remove same-sex couples from the list of specifically prohibited marriages. It also repeals the prohibitions on recognizing same-sex marriage from out of state. Section 4 replaces a single reference there to bride and groom with the word parties in the requirement that the newly married couple must provide their address on their marriage license applications. Section 5 removes gender-specific references in the requirements for solemnizing a marriage. It also protects the exclusive freedom of religious entities to preserve their own religious doctrine on the question of who may marry within their faith. Finally, it forbids any fine, penalty, or lawsuit against a member of the clergy for refusing to officiate at the marriage to which they object for any reason. And there's going to be an amendment that'll be coming forward later that I will accept that clarifies that even more. Section 6 has two provisions. It first makes it clear that the marriage bill makes no change in the individual human rights and expansive religious freedom protection already contained in our 20-year-old Minnesota Human Rights Act. It ensures that the marriage bill has no effect on pre-existing anti-discrimination laws, which means that it does not increase the legal liability of any person, business, labor union, or religious institution, and it expressly states that the marriage law will not impose legal liability on nonprofit religious institutions for providing adoption, foster care, and or social services, provided that they do not accept public money for these specific services. The second provision there would remove gender-specific rights and responsibilities of spouses and parents under Minnesota law, making them applicable regardless of gender. And I want to say that the first amendment I'm going to be offered is one that I put together actually after talking sometime with Representative Holberg that makes it clear that we are not changing or in any way having an unintended effect on heterosexual families, women who are biological parents. So this will just specifically make it clear that we're clarifying that this is only in civil marriages regarding persons of the same sex, that we're having that gender neutrality. And Section 7 equalizes the availability of divorce for same-sex, opposite-sex couples under the state law. The current law, as you may know, requires that a person seeking divorce must live in Minnesota for 180 days prior to filing. This section allows couples to seek a divorce in Minnesota courts if they were validly married in Minnesota, but now live in a different state where they are denied divorce because that state may not have a marriage law that allows them to marry. So, members, that's the bill. And Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk that I would like to offer first.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Clark moving to amend House File 1054, the first engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded 90.
Representative Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. As I mentioned, I had talked with Representative Holberg, and this law clarifies that we're talking about gender neutrality only in a civil marriage between persons of the same sex. And Representative Holberg, I'll let you know that I talked with a judge in Hennepin County who says this does it. She said she thought it was clear before, but this gives comfort language and makes it very clear. I urge members' support.
Any discussion to the amendment? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Fitzsimmons moving to amend House File 1054, the first engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded 619.
Representative Fitzsimmons.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm David Fitzsimmons. I've actually been a representative here for 5 months, even though this is my first time speaking. So I am actually supposed to be here on the floor, in case you were wondering. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move the amendment to the amendment, please.
There is an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment to the amendment.
Fitzsimmons moving to amend his amendment as follows. The amendment is coded 098.
Representative Fitzsimmons.
Yeah, and the amendment to the amendment made sure to address some. Does this still? I thought it maybe failed on my first attempt, so. This amendment to the amendment made sure to conform with other existing language, giving the best chance that it'll fit in with current law. So I'd ask for your support on the amendment to the amendment, please.
Any discussion to the amendment to the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment to the amendment say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails. On the amendment, Representative Fitzsimmons.
On the amendment, there were a few things with concerns with the bill that I had. I think a lot of other people had it, constituents, other members. And again, it's going to be a situation, obviously, where no one's ever completely happy with what happens. But I'd ask for your support on this. It adds civil to every reference where this references marriage. And I believe that helps to further solidify that there's a distinction between what is happening at the courthouse and what is happening in your church, in your synagogue, and any other house of worship. So I believe that's an important distinction for us to make. I believe we have to spell that clearly in law. And I always appreciate anyone's efforts to do something that they believe is increasing our liberties and increasing our freedoms. And I know that everyone in here has very different ideas of what that is. Sometimes I wish more people agreed with mine. Representative Kahn and Liebling, Driscoll and Anderson, we could have got 6-packs on Sunday if more people agreed with my freedom to purchase on Sundays, but here we are. But we have all different ideas, but I think it's always important for all of us to make sure that when we're expanding someone else's or liberty or protecting someone's freedom or liberty, that we're making sure that to our best ability that this body is watching out that it doesn't infringe on someone else's freedom and liberty. And I think that's important. I think that's going to be important on this issue going forward for everybody to keep that in mind and everybody to have sensitivity about that. I appreciate that. And I believe this amendment can help ensure that those protections of conscience exist and they're protected. And I believe that's an important thing that I hold, I think, and I think many others share that. Appreciate your support on the amendment.
And Representative Faust.
Thank you, Representative Fitzsimmons, for bringing this amendment forward. I think that this is a very important issue. As a Lutheran pastor, religious freedom is extremely important to me, and anything we can do to support that in this bill, I think that's great. So thank you very much.
Further discussion to the amendment. Representative Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I want to say I hope people will vote for this amendment. I thank you, Representative Fitzsimmons and Representative Faust, who worked on this amendment. I think it does clarify even more the protection of religious freedoms that we intend with this bill, so I appreciate that, and I urge a positive green vote.
Further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Kelly and others moving to amend House File 1054, the first engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded DE1.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Well, what a great day for Minnesota, because this is the day that we get to put an end to discriminatory language in statute for Minnesota. Representative Clark, I think this is a great picture. Our gay children should have the same rights as our heterosexual children. Well, isn't it a wonderful thing that today the only question is how we do that? You know, this has been an interesting journey for me. 2 years ago, I stood up on the House floor and spoke against the marriage amendment. The marriage amendment was going to define marriage as one man and one woman and put it in our state constitution, and I felt that was wrong. Now, I was applauded by many people out in the hallway and by the gay community and many of you on the other side of the aisle. So what has changed? Well, first of all, I'd like to speak to my civil union bill. As many of you know, I started out with a civil union bill that aligned civil unions and marriage side by side. Absolutely, the intent there was to give the same rights and benefits to same-sex couples as heterosexual couples. Well, that didn't go over very well, was not received well. It was suggested that I was a segregationist, that I wanted to create separate but equal classes, second-class citizens. I can assure you that that was not my intent. But I can tell you that it absolutely did clarify things for me. This debate is over one word, and that word is marriage. It is the reason the state of Minnesota spent $18 million debating this. You know, if we go back a couple of years, Representative Lesch, you actually spoke to this very well in your speech in the House floor. You gave us a little history lesson about the 30 Years' War, fought over religion, and the effect that that war had on our founding fathers. So much to the point that they knew that they should not put religious ideals in our Constitution. In fact, you place things that protect people from certain religious ideals, and that is how a republic stays strong. I agree with that. Do you realize that marriage is to be found nowhere in the United States Constitution? And Representative Purcell, you certainly agreed with him. In fact, you stated that the word marriage should not be found anywhere in state or federal statute. And you also said, and I'm not sure if I can see you saying this, but you said, if you give a hoot about liberty and that flag, you would vote against the marriage amendment and for defining marriage. I think that's great advice from both of you. So now we have a current civil union bill. This bill removes the word marriage from our statute and protects the word marriage from our statute and gives everyone equal rights and equal benefits in statute. The state will now enforce a civil union contract, as it does with many, many contracts. And we will all be able to believe and hold true what we believe marriage to be. Now, I have to say that preparing for this talk this afternoon really wasn't too difficult, because all I did is I went back and listened to our conversation, our 5-hour and 34-minute conversation 2 years ago. Very enlightening and very good words from the other side of the aisle. Representative Davnie, you stated something you've used since 2004. And you said the core of this issue is that gay and lesbian families have the same needs as a straight family: for financial stability, for access to health care, for respect of their family's integrity and values of their inheritance rights, and to all the other distinctions of civil law and civil rights. It is just that simple. And I really do appreciate the way Representative Mariani and Representative Hornstein framed the debate. Representative Hornstein, you quoted a Nobel laureate who stated very succinctly that life is about moments. Moments that define our humanity. The birth of a child, a graduation, and a wedding. You spoke about your friends' wedding, Scott and Richard. What a sacred ceremony that was, and how special that was, and what a moment that was. And you were concerned, and absolutely should have been, that we were defining marriage, and now the government was defining how we experience those moments. That was wrong. And it's wrong that we define marriage today. And Representative Mariani, I think you probably summed it up best. What a great, great quote. You said that laws exist to govern our activities, not to govern who we are. In fact, that we were running a huge risk by placing in our Constitution the ability of one group of folks to govern the who-ness of another. Fantastic word. But it's right on. And you were afraid that this risk of having this one group of people, by simple virtue of being in the majority, was going to impose their views on a group of citizens. Members, I am not the enemy here today. This amendment is the voice of reason. I understand what the emotional attachment is to this debate. We've lived it. We've all lived it for the last 2 years. But if we continue with this existing bill in this format, we are doing exactly the same thing that we were fighting for and against for the last 2 years. We are doing the exact same thing that we all stood up for 5 hours and 24 minutes and railed against. Don't define marriage. That's not up to the government. 2 years ago, I stood up and I quoted a line from a movie, and Representative Murphy, I think you said it was one of your favorite movies. It was American President, where the president stated, you know, America isn't easy. America is advanced citizenship, and you've got to want it bad, because it's going to put up a fight. It's going to say, you want free speech? If you want free speech, then let me see you acknowledge a man standing center stage, advocating at the top of his lungs that which you would spend a lifetime opposing at the top of yours. Show me that and make that be a symbol of your country. Folks, we might not agree with everybody here. We certainly do not agree with everybody here on the word marriage. But it does not suggest that we should impose our beliefs on everyone. 2 years ago, it was about rights. It was about freedom. Freedom of speech, freedom of choice. You know, and at that time, I asked Representative Kriesel, I asked him to stand and answer a question, why was he in Iraq? His quote, "I chose to go to Iraq so I could defend our way of life and our freedom, and to promote freedom to an oppressed group of people on the other side of the world." Nowhere in his comments did he suggest that he went over there to impose his beliefs on someone else. So here we are today. This is a great day. We can stop, we can put an end to discrimination and prejudice, and we can pull the discriminatory language out of statute. All I'm saying is there is a right way to do that and a wrong way to do that. Representative Paymar, you talked about the 3 C's. Who do we listen to when we make decisions? Our caucus, our constituents, and our conscience. Today we have to make that decision and we have to move forward. What I'm suggesting is that we do not do what we implored everyone not to do 2 years ago. But let's do this the right way, and I look forward to eliminating discrimination from statute. I'd urge your support.
Representative Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members, and thank you, Representative Kelly. You're no one's enemy. You're a friend. And I think all of us, no matter where we fall on this issue, respect you and respect how mightily you have struggled to try to find what you see as common ground. But unfortunately, I stand to oppose your amendment, and here's why. I understand what you're trying to do, but what this amendment does is take away marriage from 2.2 million Minnesotans. There are 1.1 million heterosexual marriages in Minnesota right now, and this amendment would say they are no longer married. They don't have a husband, they don't have a wife, they have a civil union partner or something like that. And I think that would be news to our constituents. Aside from all the obvious issues of how you calculate benefits on the federal level if you work for the post office or the Pentagon, it's going to be very, very difficult for Minnesota to say that we will no longer recognize marriage. We will only recognize civil union, a term that the federal government doesn't recognize. So this amendment, though I understand what you're trying to do, undoes 1.1 million marriages in the state of Minnesota in service of a concept that I understand, in service of a goal that you're admirable for pursuing, but this language in this amendment doesn't do it. Instead, it undoes marriages in Minnesota. The better approach, in my judgment, and I hope a majority at the end today, is to give everyone that freedom to marry and not diminish marriage for those who already have it. So I respectfully, very respectfully, urge a no vote on the amendment.
Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members, Representative Kelly, my friend. I don't say that lightly. We've had some very good discussions, and we will continue as friends. But I'm standing up to oppose the amendment at this time. And you're right, my language that I have used and supported in the past in the constitutional framework of First Amendment versus 14th Amendment, very strongly. This is constitutional to me, every bit of it. However, if we remove marriage at this time in Minnesota without having concomitant removal of that word across government, including in the use in military documents, we will deprive Minnesotans of their constitutional rights under the 14th Amendment. And I'll wrap up by saying one thing, and you quoted me on several things that I did say, and I'm going to bring one back that I also said a couple years ago. And I quoted, to the best of my ability, probably better say paraphrase, Martin Luther King, Roosevelt Baptist Church, 1964. Why should I, he said, support sending young black men to fight in Vietnam for liberties that they do not have in this United States of America? This is about liberty. We can't change the word in Minnesota in the meeting without changing it across all governments at this time. I do not support the amendment.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just in regards to taking away marriage, Representative Simon and Representative Purcell, I would have to respectfully disagree. There is no way a government could take away my marriage. Marriage is between myself, my wife, my church, and God. And the government will never be able to take that away. And Representative Purcell, it is about liberty. It's about liberty for all. As a government, we can stand here and enforce contracts, but we do not have the right to tell someone what their beliefs should be. And the current bill is suggesting exactly that. We need to stand up just like we did 2 years ago and say it's not right to define marriage for anyone. The federal government, as I said, in the U.S. Constitution, marriage is not anywhere in the Constitution. The federal government has always acquiesced to the states in regards to their definite definition of marriage. There are many definitions of marriage across the nation, and that is why they do that. In this bill, it states that for federal purposes, a civil union would be construed as marriage. So you're starting to look at arguments and trying to justify and rationalize why we are trying to define marriage, and that's wrong. I would urge your support and would appreciate a green vote on the amendment. I'd ask for a roll call, please.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I did rise to request a roll call. My colleague beat me to it. I will just say a few things. Today is very joyous for many people, and it's difficult for many people as well. And I would say it's difficult for a variety of reasons, but one of those is because on a day like this, when we have to think about what's the right thing to do, so many different things are weighed. Our personal views, our constituent views, human rights issues, all those things are coming into play. And for people on both sides of this issue. My constituents are kind of mixed on this. And so I'm having to balance what I've learned here at the legislature, what my colleagues say, what my constituents say, and I find myself in an awkward position and have for several months now. Representative Kelly tried finding a middle ground, and I signed on that bill with him, and I'm appreciative for his efforts. He did spend a lot of time working on this. And I do want to say I also want to thank Representative Clark, because many of the same issues that have just been mentioned, Representative Clark has done a fabulous job addressing those as best she can with as many fixes as she could in the bill to help make this easier for a lot of people. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. I'm trying to. I know it's tough, but I do really appreciate all you've done. And Representative Kelly, for me, this is, I signed on your bill, and I'm standing in support of the amendment because I'm a strong supporter of the separation between church and state. And I can tell you from the letters that I received, and we all did, the most prominent theme had to do with religion, that this is a religious conflict. This is a religious issue. And so this amendment separates, as you just mentioned, the states providing those legal protections under the law for anyone that deserves it, for everyone that deserves it, and allowing that religious expression to happen in the churches. And so thank you very much for working on this. I would say this is about legal, but it's also about love, and today is a true test to our body's ability to find a way through that. And so, members, I'm gonna vote green on this amendment, and we've had the roll call. But I just want to thank both Representative Clark and Representative Kelly, and just say the best email I got, and I'm just going to let Representative Kelly know in case he didn't get this, was from someone wasn't a constituent that sent me a letter or an email, and the way she worded it is that this was an elegant solution to a very difficult problem, and I thank you for that.
Representative Kiefer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, I've been in support of this amendment also and signed my name to it. I promised after the last vote 2 years ago that I would try to find a solution, make sure that we get the rights, because I understood what the problem was. And I made that promise, and I didn't take that lightly. I think this is a compromise. We talk a lot about the word marriage, and we feel an emotion. We all do. We think of something. We have a picture in our head. What if I say the word child? You have another picture, another feeling, another emotion. What I'm trying to do here and why I support this is union takes away that emotion and makes it more of a level playing field, just like when we call a child a minor. A minor, well, I don't say, oh yes, I have 2 minors. No, we say we have children, but in the law, we try to keep that as blind as possible so it's a level playing field. I'm sorry that this bill didn't get any hearings in committee, because I think it should, because I think this discussion would have been very important. I look at politics here, and I've talked about this before. You know, it becomes so partisan in this room. There's 134 of us. And we make decisions for the entire state. And the entire state is very divided on this, and it's very emotional. We need to represent the people. Too many times in this room, there's a you lose, I win, or I win and you lose, or whatever it is. And I'd like to find a true win-win for the state, for how we're going to govern and how we're going to do the right thing. And I also understand that, folks on the other side, I know some of you are having a lot of heartburn over this, a lot of pressure. I would ask you to do the right thing and vote for this amendment. I think this would be a good solution so that we can heal and move on as a state together. And we respect everyone's rights. And we preserve families, and we respect different families. They're all structured differently. There's single-parent families. So I would just encourage you to vote green, and let's hope that the Senate concurs. And Mr. Speaker, I'd ask that you respect your members if they decide to vote green too. And when we get those green votes up, I hope the board closes. Thank you.
Representative Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Representative Kelly, I know you mean well, but I have to really urge people very strongly to vote against your bill. One just really technical but very important correction I need to make to what you talked about was, you said the federal government would be required, is in this bill, required to recognize civil unions. We took that provision out way before the hearing even in the committee, because we can't tell the federal government that to recognize civil unions, and that's the problem, part of the problem. Every state that's had civil unions has found that it doesn't work, and I believe there were 10 different states that have passed over the years civil unions. Minnesota never did it, but the states that did do it are the laboratory for that discussion and to see what happened. And I believe the states that did it included Vermont, Connecticut, New Hampshire, New Jersey. New Jersey had it in place for 10 years, and they repealed it and passed marriage. And I would say, you know, what they helped us understand is that the general public doesn't know what civil unions are. They don't know what civil unions means. You go to a hospital, you go to a store, you go to, you know, provide some sort of family recreation opportunity, and you say, well, this is we have a civil union here. It doesn't mean anything to people, and in some cases, it's actually been an urgent situation where the right of a same-sex committed domestic partner, civil union partner, has been ignored or forbidden to be recognized, and it's tragic when that's happened, and it has been life-threatening in some cases. Civil unions are not something that people understand. And unfortunately, as Representative Simon said, what this really does do, this amendment would abolish marriages in Minnesota. And I don't want to abolish marriages. I want to expand the meaning of marriages and make sure that it can include all of our families. I think it's so important that we strengthen our families. It's important to the children. It's important to the individuals involved. So I urge a red vote on the Kelly Amendment. Thank you.
Representative Loon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I rise in support, strong support for the Kelly Amendment. And I thank my friend from Red Wing for all of his work in bringing this forward. I have discovered over the past few months how incredibly popular I am. I've been visited by hundreds and probably communicated with by thousands of people. And I have listened with an open mind and an open heart intently to the views of my constituents on this. And in contemplating this issue, one of the questions that's been posed to me is, Representative Loon, what does your marriage mean to you? And I thought, what an intensely personal question, what an intensely personal answer that could be very different no matter who you're talking to. And how can government possibly capture that in an accurate way for each and every person? And it's that thought that draws me to Representative Kelly's amendment and to the solution he's offering today. Liberty, individual rights, individual freedoms, something we all hold very dear and take incredibly to heart our responsibility for upholding. Our laws are not currently equal for all persons in this state. Representative Kelly offers a solution that makes the law equal without trying to define from government an intensely personal relationship which could be different from person to person. And that's why I think he has provided a thoughtful, responsible, good solution to what has been a very difficult and sensitive and emotional issue for many of us. I understand some of the concerns that the other side has raised, but as you also know, as we stand here debating this topic today, the Supreme Court of the United States is also contemplating issues with regards to marriage in the individual states. This is a topic that is very much, I'll say, in flux right now, and we don't know where that's going to lead. I don't believe that our federal government is going to turn its back on the states and their decisions and their unique approaches to providing liberty and equality and freedom for all of its citizens. That's what our nation is founded on. How could the courts, how could the federal government find that our solution is one that somehow takes rights away from other people? I don't believe that. So members, I know this is a really tough day for a lot of us and a tough vote. I was really hoping to be very eloquent. I'm not sure I matched it. So many of you have said things that, and you in particular, Representative Kelly, that have touched me. But liberty, to quote William Allen White, liberty is the only thing you cannot have unless you are willing to give it to others. And I hope that's something we keep in mind today. Please, members, vote yes on the Kelly Amendment.
Any further discussion? Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would absolutely like to thank the body for this discussion and conversation. I can tell you that 2 years ago, I felt I was in the right, and I felt I needed to stand up for individual freedoms, individual rights, freedom of choice, freedom of speech, and I did that. The message is the same today. I'm not exactly sure why it's changed on your side. Every one of you that stood up talked how wrong it was to define marriage in any way. How you were going to take that away from certain individuals and certain groups. When I looked at this day, I look at it as an exciting day, as I said. I think this is our day. This is when we get to remove discrimination from statute. That's a good thing. But how we do that is just as important. And as far as the issues in federal government and marriage, the reason that a lot of those have failed, Representative Clark, is that they tried to match it up just like I did in the first bill. There's no state that just went solely civil unions without marriage in statute. So I looked at this as one of the most exciting things we could do as a state of Minnesota. I didn't think of the state of Minnesota. If this entire state went civil unions, what in the world would the federal government have to do at that point in time? They would have to rule on what that means. Look at the decision for them now. They have always looked to the states for our definition of marriage. So now we have a whole state out there, civil unions. The easiest thing for them to do, as Representative Norton alluded to, is separation of church and state. How can you not agree that marriage is a religious institution and a religious word? It is so important that we have fought 2 years to protect it. But we should be protecting it for everyone. And I don't know how you can look back at your speeches and suggest that it has changed today just because we're in the majority now, just because we can. We should not be defining those moments, the moments that create our humanity. We should protect everyone's rights, even if we don't agree with them. Please vote green.
Seeing no, Representative Clark.
Well, Mr. Speaker, just one comment to Representative Loon. The federal government has spoken on this DOMA, Defense of Marriage Act. So the federal government does impact us, and as did the state. And so I just want to say one other thing to Representative Kelly. I think I've been pretty consistent. I've always talked about marriage being something that should be expanded. This is not an attack on marriage. This is an opening up of marriage. So it includes all of our families. And I ask, again, Mr. Speaker, members, please give us a red vote on this bill. I do not want to abolish marriage. And this amendment, I mean, do not want to abolish marriage.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 22 ayes and 111 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File 1054 as amended.
Third reading. Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'll be brief. I believe in equal rights, and for me that includes equal rights to choose who you want to marry. So on behalf of Amber and Celeste, Greg and Billy, Maria and Jessica, Kellyanne, Matt, Therese, and countless others, and in deep respectful memory of activist Jim Chalgren, I urge a yes vote. Thank you.
Representative Cornish.
Well, Mr. Speaker and members, Representative Clark, as one of the more senior members now here, that's hard to believe. I hope to kind of set the tone today on our discussion here after third reading. And as you know, I think this is a totally different setting than we had back a while ago. I think already the media has noticed it. Not that the media hopes for disruption, mayhem, and havoc, but I don't think they're going to find that here today. The crowd is different. We're different in here. I wanted to tell you that you are an absolutely wonderful person. I have the utmost respect for you. I don't know of a kinder, more gentle woman on this floor that has a bigger heart for the environment, the underprivileged, the downtrodden, the American Indian, especially the women, and admire you. I've signed on to bills on chemicals that I can't even produce or pronounce because I trusted your judgment on that. And having said that, I hope you know that I have to veer off of our somewhat common path and vote no today on this. But I wanted to let you know that I am not a homophobe or a Neanderthal or a hater. None of those definitions, and I have the utmost respect for you and admire your convictions, like you know that I have some strong convictions on my side. And with that, I hope that the reasons are that I'm voting no. The basic one is my constituents back home, the majority of them wanted me to vote that way. And then other socioeconomic reasons, the environment that I was raised in with my mother and dad on the farm, and my interpretation of Scripture. And I know that vastly different from other Christians and other religions also, and everybody has their opinion on that. But I wanted you to know that. And I hope that my Republican friends that follow me today also do so in love and respect, and they can get up and give their reasons why they're voting no, and what they believe are good reasons like mine, but they do it with respect and not with raised voices or pointed questions or accusations or labels. And I wish you the best and hope you realize, as my constituents do back home, why I have to vote no. Thank you.
Representative Dean.
Mr. Speaker and members, Representative Clark, Representative Johnson, I agree with you that I think this is an issue of choice. My son is 20, and he has much of his life yet ahead of him. Actually, I do not know if he is gay or if he is straight. We have not had that conversation. But it makes no difference to me. I love him just the same, and I want him to have the freedom to marry the love of his life, whomever or whatever that gender might be. And it is that ability to make that choice that I speak to today. I've been in a committed relationship with my partner, Joan, for nearly 15 years. We are not married. We are not married because we choose not to be married, and a choice that currently same-sex couples do not have in the state of Minnesota. I believe they should have that choice. During the past few weeks, all of us have gotten hundreds of emails and phone calls from those who support and those who oppose marriage equality. My decision today will be somewhat easy. I personally believe in marriage equality, and the contacts from my district have been overwhelmingly in support of marriage equality. After all the contacts and all the lobbying by all our friends and neighbors, ultimately we need to make a decision to vote yes or to vote no on House File 1045. Sometimes it gets down to doing the right thing. 45 years ago, Martin Luther King Jr. gave a Passion Sunday sermon at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. During that sermon, he said, "Cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it political? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right?" And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor political, nor popular, but one must take it because it is right. My fellow colleagues, I ask you to join me today in doing what is right and to vote green. Thank you.
Representative Isaacson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, it's a privilege and honor. I feel it's amazing and lucky to be at this point in history to have the opportunity to do what I feel is the right thing. Many of you may not know this, but I'm expecting our first child in July. We're very excited, and I'm terrified at the same time, but I'm learning the best I can, and I've got some good teachers. But it really does make me think about the future and how things are going to change and the things that I want for that child and how I want to see that future unfold for the opportunities my child has. But for me, I'm a context person. I think of things in the context of the past, present, and future. And a good friend of mine, friend of over 20 years, shared with me when I was on the way in today. He said, think about how it was when we were kids. What was it like in school? What were the words we used? What was the culture of being gay back then? And what did that mean to a lot of people? And how was that used in a negative way? And is that the culture we want to have our kids growing up in? Currently, I'd like to think that culture is getting better. When I was a kid, I remember in middle school, that was one of the worst things you could call somebody else. And I think, you know, it makes me sad to think back about how that was the norm. I'd like to think today some of that's changing. And I really, sincerely hope that as we take a step forward, when my kid is in school, that just isn't even a part of the consciousness. It isn't a part of the public discourse. I grew up, and I've expressed this on the floor a little bit before, in a somewhat broken home. Parents were divorced. My mom, as I have lovingly referred to her, as a flower child hippie liberal from the 60s, and my dad was a Reagan Republican. And they didn't agree on almost really anything, right? I mean, to be fair, except one thing. They taught me from the very beginning, love no matter what. Both sides, love no matter what. It trumps the rest. And someone recently accused me on Twitter of being divisive. Friends, I don't think equality and love is ever divisive. I see this as something that is uniting. And I know some don't agree with me, but I've had the opportunity to have many folks come to my office who are adamantly opposed to this bill. And by the end of those conversations, we left as friends. It could have been ugly, could have been a horrible discourse, it could have been one angry exchange, but my responsibility as a statesperson, as a public official, is to let every single person be heard and to let them know that I respect where they're at. I developed some wonderful relationships. I've been able to help them out on other issues, and I'm hoping that as time goes on, whatever wounds are there or divisions are healed. But I can tell you that for myself, voting yes is an intensely personal thing, and I vote yes not for myself, but also for my kid, also for a chance to change the culture. I think that's just vitally important. I want to thank Karen and others who've been around longer than I have, who have shepherded me through when I've seemingly ran stuff over, been a bit of a bull in a china shop at times. I'm just really appreciative of that. I'm grateful to be here, and I'm excited and very proud to vote yes. Thank you.
Representative Bernardi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I know and respect that Minnesotans are struggling with equality of marriage for everyone in our state. I also know as Americans, we have the value of freedom, fairness, and love. And we stand together with the belief that everyone in our community ought to be treated fairly and equally under the laws of our state. On this historic day in Minnesota, I am honored to have the opportunity to stand up for liberty, love, and justice for all Minnesotans with my vote yes. Thank you.
Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as has been said numerous times on the floor about this particular issue, this is indeed a divisive issue. And if it's one thing we've learned in the last election, is that Minnesotans are divided on this issue, with many passionate emotions, many passionate ideas about the definition of marriage. And today we are on the House floor debating another divisive social issue. And I will tell you that many of us ran in the last election with the idea that we were coming to St. Paul to deal with fiscal issues. We were going to come to St. Paul, we were going to stop the gimmicks, we were going to make sure those things that are important to us are funded, that in my case keep taxes low, in some of your cases to raise revenue. But I'll tell you what I did run on when it comes to social issues, and that is not to redefine marriage. And today we are being asked to redefine marriage. Marriage is intensely important to all of us. All of us will say that. Regardless of where you stand on this issue, it obviously is intensely important to you. But we are redefining today in this bill a definition of marriage that has been a bedrock of our society for thousands of years. So if it weighs heavy on your heart, it should. We are redefining an institution that has been the bedrock of our society for generations. Generations have sat on this floor and protected that definition of marriage, and today we're being asked to change that. And if you can think for a moment, just sit back and think for a moment about why this is a passionate issue. We're asked to empathize with the idea that we should redefine marriage. And I'm asking you to empathize with at least half of Minnesotans who disagree with that. Think about them as well, because this is important to them. This is close to their hearts. As Representative Loon said, marriage means something to each and every one of us. It is love, it is our family, but from a societal standpoint, it also is important definition, because it is, again, the bedrock of what this state and this country has relied upon for generations. So let me talk for a minute about religious liberties. So it's been stated that religious liberties are protected in this bill. And for those of you who think that the Fitzsimmons amendment that has been put onto this bill provides those religious liberties and says that now I'm okay with redefining marriage, basically what it does is it takes the Human Rights Act that already exists and puts it into this bill. There's no additional protections. It doesn't protect small businesses. It doesn't protect persons. It doesn't protect conscientious objectors. It doesn't do any of that. In fact, it talks about controlled religious institutions. And we can debate for hours, and I won't, on what that means. It talks about secular business. So we are defining now what secular business is versus religious business. And think for a moment, for me, it makes it easy. Think about the Knights of Columbus Hall in your neighborhoods. And the Knights of Columbus Hall, and whether or not when they lease that out to an individual, whether that is business. And good legal scholars have said that is secular business. And today, it's never been challenged. No one has come to the Knights of Columbus and said, you're not giving us your facilities, and that's discrimination. Because today, it's not marriage. Because today, the state hasn't sanctioned that as an appropriate definition of marriage. This bill passes, becomes law, the governor signs it, it does. And it becomes much more difficult for those religious institutions to be able to say, we're going to solemnize that that's okay. But because that is probably going to be construed as being a business for profit, this is a Knights of Columbus Hall, then they will be considered discriminatory. We are classifying half of Minnesotans as bigots in this bill, and they're not. They're not. These are people with deeply held beliefs, including myself. And members, just to reiterate what I said in the beginning, if you have a heavy heart, you should. Because if you vote green on this bill, you are redefining marriage. One of the most sacred and important institutions that we have. So all that I ask for you to do is, if there are members who still are undecided, who are still thinking and digging deep, maybe praying, maybe talking to constituents, and certainly in my district, constituents have overwhelmingly told me they don't support this redefinition of marriage. Think about those things before you hit a green button. Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members.
Representative Mullery.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. It's only a little over 2 years ago when the raid on Stonewall seemed to trigger the gay rights movement in this country. Last night I was thinking about this historic vote we are taking today and about how I, without ever planning or intending to do so, have been able to have a tiny part in the human rights struggle of the last few decades. As many of you know, several years after Stonewall, I was in college and working part-time at a job there. And a new group on campus came in and wanted to have a gay dance at Kaufman Union at the University of Minnesota. The request was turned down by the Student Activities Bureau, and it was appealed to the office I was in. I checked with other universities. Not even liberal ones like Berkeley and Harvard had ever allowed gay dances at their universities. But it just seemed right to me, and so I recommended that to my boss. He said he really didn't care, but that I could get fired over it. I could do it and allow it, but I was taking responsibility. So I went ahead with it, and little did I understand at the time that it was going to go viral and appear on news all over this nation and even all over the world. That's how shocking it was just merely 40 years ago, and how far we've come from then. The U got thousands of complaints. For about 3 months, I was on the verge of being fired, but lasted it out. Many older GLBT friends even still tell me that they came to the Twin Cities originally just because of seeing that video on the news wherever they were in the country, and they thought we were a welcoming community. Now, 40 years later, I'm really lucky to be privileged to be here and able to do one more small thing, and that's vote for putting equality into the law. I tell you that story today just to encourage people to stand up for what's right. 4 decades ago, I did what was right, and I'm proud of it. And if you support equality today, I think you'll be proud of it the rest of your life. Now is the time to let loving couples have full rights under the law and to be treated as full-fledged citizens whether born gay or straight. Now is the time to give young children equal opportunities growing up, whether their parents are gay or straight. Right now, they and their parents not only suffer because of the many monetary and social barriers they face under the law, but also because of the emotional problems they face because their parents aren't considered married under the law. It is really insidious what we are doing to those children under present law. It took centuries for people to be treated equally under the law, despite the color of the skin they were born with. Now is the time to treat people equally under the law, whether they were born gay or straight. To paraphrase a great Minnesotan, now is the time to step out of the darkness of discrimination and into the bright light of equality for GLBT couples. Vote for equality. Thank you.
Representative Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A couple years ago, I introduced the Civil Union for All bill. Regarding the concept of this bill, one of my daughters had worriedly asked, but which day will I call my wedding anniversary? The day we had the civil union or our wedding day? Well, that probably was the least of the problems with that bill. But as it turns out, this daughter had her wedding celebration at a Mexican beach resort, but in order to have an American marriage certificate, they were married a couple weeks earlier in Las Vegas. And no problem, their anniversary is their wedding date. But the times have changed since that civil union bill, and the very word marriage is so charged with such hopes and dreams and depths of meaning that it rightly has become the focus. Yes, there are the 515 laws for economic protection and societal privileges, like being able to be with your loved ones in the hospital. These simply need to be equally accessible for all. But there's something else too. This word marriage is more charged today with hopes and dreams and depths of meaning because of the examples of those who have lived its essence without the permission to use the word for so many years. We have learned from them, from Karen and from Susan and from my friends Nancy and Becky, we have learned from them the depth and expansiveness of this commitment. They have helped to deepen our understanding that relationship is built on shared commitment, on love and devotion beyond a piece of paper or a societal imperative, and that family is more complex and amazing than we have thought. I offer the LGBT community the gift of this word, marriage, and I thank them for helping us see more clearly that authentic and enduring relationships are beyond any word or label.
Representative Mariani.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This morning, when I awoke, like everyone here, I was thinking about this day and the vote that we would be casting here today and the words that would be shared. And I think it's very important that we, in fact, slow down and allow whoever, all of us, to be able to express our thoughts here today. These are very important moments for a body like this. It's certainly important when we pass a bonding bill or a K-12 bill and we make those investments, but these moments are special moments. They speak to the fundamentalness of who we are as people and as a democracy. The thought I had this morning was how this issue seems to have followed me around since the day I first arrived here in the 1991 session. And the thought that I had when I thought that was, Carlos, how often does justice come knocking at the door? In the 91 session, the issue before us was the state human rights statute, as Representative Clark shared, and whether we would include in its protection our gay and lesbian citizens. And of course, that statute, as you all know, was created knowing that often the majority will single out the minority because, in fact, they are different, and because they're different will do them harm. Justice came knocking in 1991, but the door was not open. And justice kept knocking because, frankly, that's what justice does. A few years later, we here in the legislature heard the knock, and we answered the door. And it took a diversity of us members. It took Democrats and Republicans, including an evangelical Lutheran minister who served in the Senate at that time. It took all of us to recognize our gay, lesbian, Minnesotan citizens in that statute. In the late 90s, justice came knocking again, and I was here, but the door remained shut when we passed the statute that we are undoing today, which discriminates against our gay, lesbian neighbors who seek marriage. But the knock on the door continued here and all across this nation. In 2012, the sound at the door was indeed very loud. But we rushed to the door to bar it tighter, to in fact have the majority dictate to the minority who they are, as opposed to having them define themselves. Later that year, Minnesotans everywhere heard the knock at the door and responded in the way their heart dictated. And in the end, the majority decided to stop locking the door. Not to open it, but to stop saying no. Today, the door is rattling. Justice is at the door again. Members, how often does justice come knocking? Well, until the door is open. I want to thank you all today. And for those who have served here that I've served with who are not here with us today, for wrestling honestly with this issue for all these years. You see, I believe justice requires struggle. It requires acknowledging doubt. It doesn't make it easy for us to open the door. It demands that we grow. And it offers our union the ability to become something better, something fuller, that perfect union our ancestors call us to be. It is with honor for me today to cast this yes vote and to make our state a stronger and fuller place. How often does justice come knocking? Until we open the door.
Representative Gruenhagen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. I just would like to initially say I have strong convictions about traditional marriage. I think most of you realize that. But I hold no animosity towards Representative Clark or anybody who holds her position, okay? As most of you are aware, I did 13 years of jail ministry on a voluntary basis, and I've talked with people that have committed just about every crime that has happened, and and every type of ethnic background. So I'm not here in any way to condemn anyone, but I do have some specific questions. If Representative Clark would yield.
She will yield. Representative Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you. From some constituents, a principal at a parochial school, and it has to do with the bill. If we look at the bill on Section 6, okay, Religious Freedom Human Rights Act, page 3, but then you flip it over to page 4, Part B, on line 4.6. I'll wait till you get there. And it talks about, or educational institution does not receive public funds from the specific program or purpose. And this has to do with religion. The Part B has to do with the religious freedom. The concern by the principal was that they receive money for curriculum for their parochial school of $70 per pupil unit, and they also receive federal and state money for hot lunches and several other subsidies. And as he reads this, it implies to him that subdivision 2 will apply, okay, which is right below that. And I'll just read that. When necessary to implement the rights and responsibilities of spouses or parents under the laws of the state, including those that establish parentage presumptions based on marriage, gender-specific terminology such as husband, wife, mother, father, widow, widower, or similar terms must be construed in a neutral manner to refer to a person of either gender. So it's a mandate, members, about the use of the terminology husband, wife, mother, father, widow, and widower. His concern is because they receive public money, Representative Clark, that the parochial school will have to purchase curriculum that includes a gender-neutral terminology rather than curriculum that includes some of the terminology that evidently needs to be changed in your bill. So the result is they'll either have to give up the help from public subsidy or be forced to change their curriculum under this mandate. And he did add that many parochial schools refuse any type of public subsidy because of the strings that come along with it to help that particular parochial school. So that was his primary concern. So Mr. Speaker, Representative Clark, if you would respond to that. Thank you.
Representative Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Gruenhagen. No, that principal doesn't need to worry. this does not deal at all with curriculum, and we actually modified that portion of the statute with the language that I told you that I worked with Representative Holberg on, which said it only applies to couples of the same sex, same gender who are married. So it does not have anything to do with school curriculum. They're not required to change that in any way. That's just not the way this would apply. The Human Rights Act is still in effect. It doesn't expand it or eliminate it or detract it in any way.
Representative Gruenhagen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for that response, Representative Clark. Here's the other question he had and his concern, and I'm sure your response will be similar if Representative Clark would yield.
She will yield. Representative Gruenhagen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Clark. And again, I know you've said this is not going to happen, but he went on to say the way he sees this, that means that eventually, either through activist lawsuits, which we know can come against these provisions and strike them down, that children will actually be corrected or reprimanded in a school for using terminology that does not fit the new definition of family. Would you respond to that concern, Representative Clark?
Representative Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Gruenhagen, this bill certainly does not infringe on the First Amendment, which I think is what you're talking about. No, it does not in any way affect that. I think we had a bullying bill the other day that talked about when those words are used in a hurtful way, in a way that's, actually endangering people. That's a different issue. This is strictly talking about opening marriage, the meaning of marriage, to include same-sex couples. And so it does not have anything to do with a school curriculum. That's a local school board decision. And you could, I'm sure in whatever school you're talking about, you could check with your local school board and see what their position is on their curriculum.
Representative Gruenhagen.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for that response, Representative Clark. As you probably know, I was a school board member for 16 years. And my experience has been this, Representative Clark, and it really sums up the concern both of the principal and some of my constituents, is that once things are put into law, like you talked about the Human Rights Act, sexual orientation, then eventually they show up in public school curriculum, okay? And I've seen that numerous times. I could give you several examples, but I won't. So as a school board member, sometimes used older terminology, and not that it's illegal to use that terminology, but I was actually chided as a public school board member to not use certain words on the school board, okay? So once something's in statute, it begins to seep down into our educational process. And Representative Clark, here is the concern. When we look at Massachusetts, okay, we see that parents have been denied the right to remove their children from objectionable sex ed classes based on the redefinition of marriage. Again, it was done by judges, not by a legislature. We also see that parental control of their education is eroded with the redefinition of marriage. And what I mean by that is it's parents that have, as Representative Woodard implied, deeply held religious beliefs about what their children should be taught. So one of the primary concerns people of my persuasion have, and parents of my persuasion, of children of parents with small children, is that their children will be eventually forced to be taught a politically correct philosophy about sexuality that they find to be offensive religiously and publicly in terms of what they want their children taught. Do you see that as a possibility, Representative Clark?
Representative Clark will yield. Representative Clark.
Representative Gruenhagen, no, again, there's nothing in this bill that has any effect on local control by school boards of what's in the curriculum.
Representative Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. Let me just say this. I appreciate your response, but my personal experience tells me otherwise. And I believe the concerns of the principal of the parochial school in my district and the concerns of the parents and the experience I see happening in Massachusetts and other states is that this type of agenda and verbiage will be forced down into our schools and taught to children whose parents want nothing to do with it. And as we've seen in Massachusetts, they're actually prohibited from taking their children out of that sex ed. Representative Clark, I do not believe that is your intention, okay? But I do believe there are activist groups that will file lawsuits, and there are activist judges, as we've seen in other states, that will strike provisions, regardless of how well we intend the law, that will ultimately force this into our educational system, both public and parochial. And it's one of the reasons I strongly recommend that we don't redefine marriage and that we oppose this bill. Finally, I would simply say this, is that there's over 2,500 studies in the social sciences that confirm the benefit of traditional marriage for men, women, and especially children. The latest was Dr. Mark Reganis out of the University of Texas, Austin. He did the most extensive study ever on the results of children raised in different types of family units, and he conclusively proved that the best situation for children, on average, is to have a mom and a dad in a stable marriage relationship. On average. My daughter is a single-parent mom. There's exceptions. And I was raised a single parent, and not totally, but partially. I believe that's what's at stake here, is the future benefit of the children and what they're taught and the parental rights. And I know it's not your intention, Representative Clark, but I believe if we pass this today, we're on a slippery slope to mandating education to our children, contrary to the firmly held religious beliefs of over half the citizens of the state of Minnesota. Please, members, think carefully what's best for the children. Please vote to protect the children on this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members.
Representative Breinert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. I stand today to hold up this moment and the importance of this deliberation for all of us in our homes, our families, our communities, and our society. I recognize that we do not all agree, but I am hopeful that we are all able to hold a deep respect for the personal journeys, histories, and struggles that have brought us to this time. My husband and I will celebrate our 45th wedding anniversary in 11 days. While we definitely note and honor the occasion, coming as it has these past years on the heels of the ends of both the legislative session and the university semester's ends, we have often lately sought the simplest and quietest forms of celebration, as in getting extra sleep. What we know is that we love one another, that we've chosen to commit to one another and live our lives in an open and connected manner, that we've raised our children and our grandchildren together with our extended families, friends, and neighbors, and joined together with our community to work on behalf of healthy youth, healthy families, and healthy communities. Our personal and public lives have intertwined. Our neighborhoods and communities have supported us, and we them. Why do I share this personal story today? Because I have family members, friends, neighbors, and community members who, while possibly having one piece or another of this interwoven personal and public life, have not been able to have what we have had. What I want to do today is to extend to those very others, our gay and lesbian family, friends, and neighbors, the privileges, challenges, trials, tribulations, and triumphs that are part and parcel of married life. Today, I will vote for love and family. Today, I will vote for marriage equality.
Representative Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Last night, I left session pondering whether I would speak on behalf of House File 1054. Not because I don't believe it's the right thing to do. I believe it is. But more because as a person of faith, I didn't want to upset those in the Black community of faith who believe that marriage is between a woman and a man. But this morning, I woke and I knew what I had to do. As a descendant of slavery and one whose ancestors were seen as less than, I cannot take that message forward into the 21st century and deny an individual, a human being, the dignity of loving who they are and in turn loving who they choose. For me, this decision is not so much about a religious belief, but instead it's about a basic human right, a right given to all by a well-known phrase in the United States Declaration of Independence, a phrase that is meant to exemplify the unalienable rights with which all human beings are endowed by their Creator, for their protection of which they institute governments. Today, I stand here confident, capable of celebrating this historical moment. A moment much like the one that my ancestors celebrated and believed in during the Civil Rights era, an era of being equal. There's no compromise to that. Either we are equal or we're not equal. Equal is really equal. So today, I stand believing that we are on the right side of history, a time where all, regardless of sexual preference, will be able to make a commitment through marriage to love whoever you choose to love. For nothing is stronger than love. So today, I stand in support of love. House File 1054. Thank you.
Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This Sunday is not only Mother's Day, but it's my 6th wedding anniversary. On May 12th, 2007, I was lucky enough to marry the woman I love, and I wore this suit to my wedding. Being married has given our relationship legitimacy as far as our friends and family are concerned, and a host of legal rights as far as the state of Minnesota is concerned. Legislators past and present have decided that being in a committed relationship entitles married partners to an assortment of legal rights. How can we, as representatives of all Minnesotans, deny these rights to a group of citizens whose relationships are as valid and worthy as mine is with my wife? These rights are more than speculative, and I'll provide a few examples. Minnesota Statute Section 246.70 says that the family members of a patient in a public facility have the right to be notified if the patient is moved or if the patient's care is changed. These facilities are not required, however, to notify the same-sex partners of patients. Section 62A.03 says that health or accident insurance policies may cover 2 people as long as the second person is a spouse or dependent. However, a same-sex partner does not have a statutory right to be included in a joint insurance policy. Section 273.111 says that a surviving spouse has a continued right to the agricultural property tax classification, but the same is not true for a domestic partner who has also farmed the property for years. Section 611A.01 says that if victims are killed during crimes, their families are entitled to restitution. Same-sex partners are not considered family under the law and therefore cannot receive restitution. Section 203B.02 says that someone who is married to a member of the military has the right to vote by absentee ballot. A same-sex partner of a member of the military does not. Section 149A.80 says that married people have the right to control the disposition of their spouse's remains. However, people who have made lifetime commitments to their partners have no similar right. And here, in the land of 10,000 lakes, Section 97A.475 says that a combined fishing license exists for spouses. However, no joint license exists for unmarried but committed couples. These are just some examples of how same-sex partners in committed relationships are denied rights many of us take for granted. There are, in fact, over 500 examples of such laws on the books in Minnesota. I want to close by sharing with you an email I received from a constituent in Golden Valley only yesterday who wrote about the vote we're taking today. My partner and I can no longer be helped by such a vote. He has been in a nursing home for the past 3 years. He has advanced Alzheimer's, and of course, he is unable to give informed consent. No matter what happens, one of us will die without being married to one another. I want to see a Minnesota where this cannot happen to another couple. Let's do the right thing and prevent this happening to other Minnesotans in committed, deserving relationships. I was able to get married. I love you, Lauren. LGBT people should also. Please vote green.
Representative Myra.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members, as a conservative, individual rights are one of my top priorities. Therefore, I would like to explain why I do not support this bill. For decades, I have volunteered thousands of hours serving children, including 11 years as a director of a club for 5th and 6th grade girls in South Minneapolis. I have seen children from traditional families achieve, while children from other family arrangements struggle with great challenges. I am keenly aware of children's concerns and for their welfare. With this bill, adults will choose a same-sex marriage while children will lose their opportunity, their right in some cases, to have both a mom and a dad. Mr. Speaker and members, a child's right to have a mom and a dad precedes written law. Current Minnesota statute 518.17 gives children precedence over adults. As a society, historically, we have acknowledged in our laws the importance of the next generation over the current generation. A number of years ago, I was out in Colorado on vacation, and we decided to go on the Canyon City Skyline Drive. Very early on, the sign said, you can't turn around. No U-turns, no passing, no stopping. And very soon, the shoulder on the right side of the road completely went away. There were no guardrails. We kept driving, and I kept taking pictures, and the view was magnificent. We kept driving, and then the mountainside went away on the left side, and it was as if we were driving on a ribbon tossed through the air. I kept taking pictures because the view was truly breathtaking. I needed to just be able to focus on something else. And we finally got down, we went to our hotel room, we downloaded the photos, and to my utter dismay, not a single photo turned out. That magnificent view wasn't there. It wasn't in the photos. But I looked more carefully and realized, yes, in fact, every picture had turned out. The photos had all focused on the windshield in front of me. Where is our focus? Is it on the immediate demands, the attention of the moment, or are we looking to the future generations? Last week, a member from across the aisle said, let's think about the kids and not so much about the adults. I agree with his advice. Mr. Speaker and members, children don't have money, they don't have lobbyists out here, and they don't have a vote. Nevertheless, I will be a voice in this debate for them. Children are individuals too. I will advocate for them to have both a mom and a dad. Please vote red.
Mr. Speaker and members, I want to say, first of all, thank you all for the respectful and thoughtful approach that all have taken to this issue. And I'm going to be honored to cast my vote in honor of a history that keeps us striding towards a society and a country where all are considered equal and all are supported in the pursuit of happiness. And that is such a wonderful ideal, and it is so tough, as the past hundreds of years of our country have shown. And I see this as one more step along that path. And I know it's not, no step has ever been easy for everyone. Some have taken it more in a stride, and some have hesitated. But history, I think, compels us to work towards that, and I'm hoping that we can eventually create a more accepting society for all. For some of us, our most meaningful moments and our deepest joy came from mutually pledging lifelong care and support for another person. I am just so cherished. I so cherish the man who gave me the opportunity to feel that we could together face the future with that sort of joy and confidence that comes from pledging lifelong support and care no matter what happened. Whether they will say, I do, I will, we will, or simply yes. Marriage launches the lifelong commitment of one person to the care and support of another. Those are pretty serious responsibilities, and things don't always work out right, and there's lots of tough times. I really believe that we should offer our respect, our awe, and our honor for any two people who are willing to step up to those responsibilities. I will cast my vote joyfully as I think of those whose life opportunities will expand. What a privilege we have. That is just amazing that we can, by pushing our buttons, expand the life opportunities of many. We cast thousands of votes. This one will be very meaningful. I'm honored to vote in support of the bill in front of us.
Representative Dorholt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If my good friend Larry Haas were here today, he would share his lighter side and tell a story about how on an early Sunday morning before church, a slightly disgruntled man called him up and said, Larry, what do you think about gay marriage? And Larry replied stating, well, I'm pretty happy with my wife Faye, but what did you have in mind? I'm sure Larry here is with us in spirit, as well as two other friends, Michael Raniger and Sarah Friedman. As someone with a graduate certificate in marriage and family therapy from a Catholic university, I feel it would be unethical for me to vote against this bill today. As a counselor, I could share with you story upon story about how people I worked with have been kicked out of their homes, disowned from their families, beaten up and discriminated against simply because of who they are, and many other sad stories. It is my hope with this legislation we can move forward to a culture of compassion and acceptance. It is okay for us to believe different things, and I'm not here to judge others for what they believe. I believe our democracy is best served when we are all allowed to share and practice what we believe, which is what I believe this legislation helps us do. I believe that through my good old Scandinavian Minnesota Lutheran upbringing, and from what I've learned through teachings and experience, is that God is love. And if God is love, I would dare to say that yes, love is the law. And today, I'm going to obey that law by loving my neighbor and casting a green vote.
Representative Hornstein.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and members, and thank you, Representative Clark, for all of your hard work on this and so many issues. You've been a great fellow traveler for social justice, and thank you so much for all you do for us and for our state. This is truly a transformational moment for us in Minnesota, and I've never been so proud to be a Minnesotan. And I think one of the parts of this journey that's been so satisfying for me is to hear so many stories from my constituents about what Representative Clark's legislation truly means to them. Personal stories, heartfelt stories. Like Andrew and Christabel. Andrew has found the love of his life, And he wrote me that he just simply wants to be able to plan their future together. He just simply wants marriage equality to plan their future together. And there's Amy and Jane. Amy and Jane went off to New York and got married as soon as marriage was legal for them in New York State. They simply want their marriage to be recognized here in Minnesota. And when I spoke with Amy last night, she said something so simple and so profound that in the end this vote for her was as much about their couple, Amy and Jane, but it was also about their children. It was so important to their children. And I think the common theme of so many of these stories, whether it's Andrew or Cristobal or Amy and Jane, is they just want their families and their relationships to be valued. They want their families to be valued. That's what family values are all about, right? And so King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. In our way, in our Minnesota way today, let's bend that arc just a little bit more. Let's cast a green vote for justice and for equality. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker and members.
Representative Fitzsimmons.
All right, I promise now that I started, I'm not going to do this every day. Maybe some of you know what my voice sounds like now. 15 years ago, I had a son and wasn't married, and for the most part, have raised him alone, and it's been very difficult. And but I'm more proud of him than I could ever be. But it's not something necessarily that I would teach him to do. And I think remembering that just because something is law and just because something is legal, there are going to be people that don't agree with it, that don't think it's right. And I think we always have to remember that and respect people that believe that. And I really appreciate accepting my amendment. I think it's important both in its substance and in the commitment. And I appreciate this body listening to me when I spoke on that. And the one thing I would ask you is if we find things later in the years that can make it better, that can make sure we're always watching out for as many people's liberties and freedoms as we possibly can, I just ask that you listen to me then as well. Thank you.
Representative Yaruso.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, a lot of the arguments around this issue have had to do with why are people insisting on being married? You know, why can't they just have their relationships? And if they need legal protections and whatnot, you know, you can do lawyers. And Representative Freiberg did a good job of outlining some of those issues, the issues of the legal and economic protections that marriage provides. He did leave off one that I'd like to mention. My parents were both vets, and they're buried side by side out at Fort Snelling. There's a special section at Fort Snelling for people where both of the married couple were veterans. That wouldn't be possible if they weren't married, even if they were both vets. You see, marriage provides a lot of public support, public accountability that go beyond the legal and the economic benefits that the state and the federal government grant. And some of those are religious. That's very important to a lot of us. Many of us were married in a church, and we hold that aspect of it very dear. But a lot of the public support has nothing to do with that. I don't know if anybody here knows where I got married. And I know where a couple of you got married, but the vast majority of you, I have no idea. But I treat you as married, if you are. I know you're not all married. But if you are, we treat you as married, and we don't inquire into where that happened, because there's a set of public expectations that go with that. That we hold up your relationship. That we try to do things that help keep it stable. That we celebrate long marriages. So now we have a group of people that are clamoring to be let in. And people are worried that we're going to redefine marriage and thereby destroy it. But think about it. People are worried that, marriage is going to go away, because there are a lot of people that don't get married and so on, and people that get divorced. We have a bunch of people that want in. Why aren't we celebrating that? It's a wonderful thing. We come not to destroy marriage, but to uphold it for all.
Representative Falk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, this Capitol holds a special place for all of us for various reasons, but for me it holds an additional special purpose and meaning. It's where I met my wife, and Marnie's up in the gallery up there, but it's also the place where we got married last summer. And it was just an incredible experience. And it just makes me think about what our marriage means, and it's about happiness, and it's about love, and it's about a partnership, and it's about commitment. And there's no way I could, in good conscience, deny those exact same rights to my fellow Minnesotans. And so with that, I would ask for your support on this bill.
Representative Abler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Representative Falk, I agree with you. I just was thinking about the privilege it is to serve here. And I was paging through the Green Book here, and I decided you and I need new pictures too. They're a little out of date. Our haircuts have changed since then. But a lot of people have come and gone. I was looking through at some of the people that aren't here anymore, and they've moved on. And someday we're all going to move on from here, and it's just kind of momentous to think about that. And I do talk a fair amount, but some days I'm quiet out of respect. I was quiet 2 years ago during the amendment discussion out of respect. And in the meantime, we had a very contentious election about that. That was anything but polite and respectful, and it was, in some cases, really just not our best side of what we presented. Today I'm speaking again, though. I'm decided to speak up again out of respect. For me, this is a matter of my faith and of respect and not disrespect. And I wrote some things down just so I'd stay on my track, because this is really an important kind of discussion. I do believe that marriage should be between one man and one woman. Not all of us in this room, or the Capitol, or the state agree. That's okay. We disagree on many things, on abortion, taxes, how to best do our desegregation things, and we care about all those matters deeply. We want to do the right thing about it. I'm speaking, good people can disagree. Good people disagree on a matter of marriage as well. And I've gotten a few letters from people. I've been confronted by people who thought I was being unkind or disrespectful with my view, and I wanted them to know that I wasn't. Not in the least. The hallways are filled with people who are expressing their faith, their beliefs, and their convictions. I really like it. I'm really glad they're here. The troopers invited me to stand behind one of those little cords when I walked out, and I said, no, I want to walk in with the people. So I circled around in the crowd with people with whom I agree and disagree, and I thought it was beautiful. Just a beautiful thing that in Minnesota we can come with as polar disagreement as we can possibly have. And I don't know what they're yelling yes or no or singing. I don't know who's doing what out there. But isn't this a wonderful day that we can do that? And walking with those people actually gave me energy. And I didn't want to come in, frankly. I'd rather still be out there with those people. And I get to talk now, so it's good to be here. But I hope we can appreciate that. And this is one of the hallmarks, I think, of our American religious freedoms. Freedom to worship as we choose, Christian, Jewish, Muslims, or not at all. Our forefathers and many others have bled for this freedom, but built on that, loving respect is a key to our great country working. It's working today, and I'm proud to be part of that. And I walked the halls and I just felt that freedom. I was just overcome. And people were surprised I wasn't racing to get in, but I just loved the moment out there with people who disagreed and agreed with me. And there's no disrespect or hate out there. Today's disagreements and the peaceful behavior symbolize the strength of our system. Representative Kelly mentioned in his comments about his hierarchy. My hierarchy has been creator, conscience, constituents, and I've tried to put political considerations at the end of it. And many of us have said the same thing. But I want to speak on behalf of those who have considerable concerns about this and the ramifications of this bill. And so my vote today, which is no, on House File 1054, is not made lightly or in a cavalier way or with any disrespect. It's made based upon my faith with just the highest regard for those in this group and outside and across Minnesota who believe differently. Thank you very much.
Representative Allen.
Mr. Speaker and members, I want to start by saying thank you to all those who have committed themselves to bringing about marriage equality, especially Representative Clark and Senator Dibble, who have spoken out from their hearts, I believe out of a strong desire to live in accordance with their values. I begin by saying that I respect the sanctity of marriage and what it means to various groups and individuals. In Ojibwe culture, we believe that sharing a life with another is a sacred responsibility. Individual couples may get married in the Medewan Lodge by a pipe ceremony that involves lighting a small fire, feeding each other, sharing water, and sharing the pipe. This Ojibwe ceremony has existed since time immemorial, and it will continue regardless of what we decide here today. This bill is about marriage equality under the law. I have always resisted the idea that minority groups, including the LGBT community, need to be included within the existing legal, political, and social frameworks, rather than changing such frameworks for themselves. In other words, I object to the notion of equality with a dominant group. Therefore, my hope is that marriage equality will no longer be defined solely on the terms of heterosexuals, because it promotes assimilation as a way to gain legal rights rather than representing a challenge to the values that predominate in the dominant culture. Of course, equality with those who currently enjoy the privilege to marry is entirely appropriate when it eliminates the extreme hardships of unequal treatment or to achieve particular goals, as this bill does. But it's important to me how we frame marriage equality. I realize my discussion of equality and privilege is far beyond the scope of this bill, so I will tell you why I support this bill. I support this bill because it recognizes that marriage is dynamic and that marriage is a human good with certain inherent requirements that the state does not create but should recognize and support in all forms. I believe this is the first step in improving the ways in which members of the LGBT community are represented and treated. Thank you.
Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, thank you all for the courteous debate. This has been very good. I heard one of our colleagues speak earlier about waking up this morning, and she kind of got some of my speech here, but I'm going to say it anyway. But I kind of made a habit of waking up in the morning, and before I turn on any squawk box, radio, or whatever, I just try and listen what's going on. And I woke up this morning and I was thinking about one of my grandchildren. And I do back and forth with some of my grandchildren. They're homeschooled. And so part of their schooling is writing to Grandpa. And I write back. And they can probably write better than me, but I try and help learn them anyway. And so I was thinking about that, and I thought, you know, it was a couple weeks ago now, we were exchanging letters in the mail. This is done in the old postal mail. You got to write it out, not on the computer, but writing. And my one granddaughter quoted something. They must have been studying about history, and quoted something that what's a good thing to live by, and it was a Bible verse. And I was thinking, you know, what would I say back to her on this? And the only thing that could come to mind was something I try and live by, and it's a pretty simple little phrase, and it goes like, do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly. Some of you might know the origin of that. But it's just a few little words. So I woke up thinking about that. And it kind of fit with the rest of the day for me, and what I thought about this day and what this day might be like, because it wasn't long when I actually was thinking about the day and what are we doing here today in St. Paul, Minnesota. Many of us many miles from our homes, many miles from our loved ones. And so I thought about those words and thought about what I would say if I was going to say anything today. I didn't really know if I would, but I was reminded by some of our exchanges earlier this morning, and in a kind way reminded, I would say. And the whole issue that we're talking about goes back to liberty. I'm not saying anything probably that hadn't been said, but I'm going to say it the way I want to say it. It's about liberty. And some of you might remember when I sat over there where Representative Falk sits, and one day, what was under some burr under my saddle, but we were doing the Pledge of Allegiance, and I complained that I couldn't see the doggone flag. And it bothered me that I couldn't see the flag. So I always wear one on my lapel anyway, so I'm going to do that if I have to. But I really take that to heart, as I know we all do, in saying that Pledge of Allegiance in those last few words. And some of us say them pretty loud, Representative Anzelk, and it's because we believe what we're saying with everything in our heart and soul, with liberty and justice for all. That's what we're doing today. Let's smile and do it well. Support the bill. Thank you.
Representative Moline.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Today is truly a beautiful and historic day in Minnesota. And we are here together, as we are many days, as 134 Minnesotans elected from all corners of this great state. We all have diverse backgrounds, and all of our families look different. But we are here together to make a decision on Minnesota families. Members, I'm planning on getting married next month, and I'm looking forward to marrying my high school sweetheart next month. But not all Minnesotans have the freedom to marry the person they love like I do. Members, now is the time that we all allow all Minnesotans the opportunity to marry the person that they love. Now is the time for all Minnesotans, no matter who they are, where they come from, or where they live in our great state, to be treated equally under the law of Minnesota. Members, please join me and vote for freedom, love, and equality. Vote green. Thank you.
Representative Faust.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I have to start by admitting not too long ago, I probably would have voted no on this bill. But in the past, there have been a couple things that have changed my mind on this. The first one is in the last 10 years, I've had conversations with hundreds, and I guess now it's in the thousands of people about this issue. And in 99.9% of the time, the people that are opposed to gay marriage, at some point in their discussion, they always say, "My Bible says." And so if this is the reason or the rationale for being opposed to this or for why this law is currently in place, the question that keeps going through my mind over and over again is, do we as a society have the right to impose our religious beliefs on somebody else? A right that I have taken for granted, and most of the people in this room have taken for granted since the day we realized what the opposite sex is. That is a right that I've taken for granted for a long time. And yet some people, because of others' religious beliefs, do not have that right. The other thing that happened was last summer, I got married. And before that, I had dated a woman for 4 years. And she was a wonderful woman. And I realized after 4 years that I could have married her and I would have been happily married to her for the rest of my life. But I also realized I could be happy without her. And I decided after 4 years that I wasn't going to marry somebody I could live with. If I got married again, it was going to be to somebody I could not live without. And so we broke up. And in a few months, I met my wife. And it didn't take me very long to realize this was somebody I could not live without. And how lucky I am. How lucky we are. And yet in this state, there are people that feel that way about each other, that cannot live without that other person, that feel the same way they do about each other that I feel about my wife, and yet because of religious beliefs of other people, they do not have the right that I have taken for granted since the day I realized what the opposite sex was. This last weekend, I was at our Synod Assembly, and a young man got up and he spoke about courage. And while he was speaking, my mind wandered. I hate to admit that. But it wandered to the courage that it takes today to vote for this bill when the majority of the people in my district do not agree with this. But then my mind wandered even further to the young man or woman that every day has to get up and go to school knowing that they are going to be picked on, knowing they are going to be called names, knowing that there's a good chance they may get beat up because they are who God made them to be. Children of God, brothers and sisters of ours, children of God. And yet they do not have the same rights that we do. And so today we have the opportunity to give a part of our population, fellow brothers and sisters of God, the same rights that most of us have taken for granted since the day we knew what the opposite sex was. Please vote to give them that right. Thank you.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members, thank you for this really respectful and rich debate that we're having today. And as was already been said, we all know that people on both sides of this issue hold feel deeply about this issue. And I am so encouraged today that it's been a respectful debate. And our words and actions ought always to be that way, not just here today, but outside of this chamber and for all people that are watching today across the state of Minnesota. Well, I have been wrestling with many questions about what the passage of this bill today could mean for the state of Minnesota, for the people of our fine state. And some of the questions I've been asking are, do we really want a genderless society? This bill removes from our laws gender-specific terminology: husband, wife, mother, father. Is this what we want? Is this what is best for our children and our grandchildren? Will this move to redefine marriage change the value of marriage? Will this change make marriage irrelevant to parenthood? In the Netherlands, where marriage has been redefined for more than a decade, there has been a decline in heterosexual marriage and a decided increase in out-of-wedlock births. This informs us that redefining marriage has had a chilling effect on the relevance of marriage as it connects to parenthood. Is this what's best for our kids? We know what out-of-wedlock births costs are to our children and to our state. Are we asking for more of that? In Spain, in the first 3 years following the legislation of same-sex marriage by the government in 2005, there was a deceleration of marriage of 15,000. So while some folks are saying that they want more marriage, is that going to be the reality that we experience here in the state of Minnesota? More questions that I wrestle with. Do we really need an institution in our law that connects children to their moms and their dads? You see, members, this is why it's not only a religious issue, as Representative Faust spoke about. Government does have an interest in marriage because it's for the stabilization of our citizenry, because it's a structure for our children. It's what's best for them. Is this what all Minnesotans want? Is another question, or is this metro-focused? Will some of our neighbors, our friends, our local businesses be dragged into expensive court proceedings for alleged discrimination because of their beliefs on this issue when they refuse to provide a service for a same-sex wedding? Is defining marriage as between a man and a woman really discrimination? Will half of the state consider the other half of the state to be bigots? Were our founding fathers bigots? How about people living 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago? Bigots and discriminators? I don't think so. What about little Grace Evans, the 11-year-old that testified in our Civil Law Committee on this bill? What parent don't I need? My mom or my dad, is what she said. This 11-year-old was ridiculed and attacked on social media for her comments. A little girl, age 11. What about Grace and children like her that believe like she does? Another question, as many of you know, I'm an advocate for shared parenting, equal shared parenting. Well, we have to reorder our family law away from what is best for the child to around the happiness of two adults. What is the public purpose of marriage? Why is government involved? We've talked about that. But is it because two people love each other? Or is it because it provides the best structure for rearing children and building a stable citizenry? Is this a civil rights issue? Is gender really as irrelevant to marriage as race is irrelevant to marriage? Will this action snatch from our children the only policy we have in our law that specifically links children to their parents? And weren't Minnesotans told last summer and last fall that if they voted no, nothing would change? Were the people of our state lied to? Are we rushing into this decision? We went from nothing at all would change to everything will change. I know that no one really wants to be the 68th vote. And I know that many of you have been hard-pressed on this issue. But I ask you, is this a decision you and your kids and future generations of Minnesotans can live well with? Well. Saturday is Mother's Day, and a month later is Father's Day, and it's a day to celebrate our moms and our dads. But none of us would be in this chamber if we did not have both. Please do a gut check on this issue before you vote. Trust your gut, and do what is best for all Minnesotans. Thank you.
Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This is an emotional day, and I really am grateful for the thoughtful and caring debate that's been going on here. And I have to say I've held myself together fairly well until Representative Abler talked about his love for our democracy, even when we don't agree, that this process is beautiful, even for all of its mess. And Representative Purcell and his love of the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm one of those same people. I get choked up when I sing the Star Spangled Banner and the Pledge of Allegiance, and today those words had special meaning for me. And so all my composure has left me. But I did want the opportunity to stand up and first of all thank everybody who have worked for years on this issue of equality. I'm a first-term member, and I haven't been here through the tough years, the hard years, the years where you guys were debating the human rights law and other policies. And so thank you for helping change hearts and minds and working together as a Minnesota to decide what kind of future we want. Like many of you, I come to this issue with a strong respect for our state, a love of my community and my district, and a great love for my family, which upholds me. And my family was not created through biology. My family was created through adoption. And I've been told at different times in regard to this issue that children need to be raised by their biological parents. And I had somebody say to me, well, your family is great, but don't you think that your son would rather be raised by his real mom? And I don't tell you that so that you feel bad for me. I tell you that to say, when it comes to moms, they don't get more real than me, and any adopted parent will tell you the same thing. And so I know that families don't all meet the exact ideal. My family was created through adoption. There are kids in this country and our state right now that are being raised by grandparents, that are being raised by single parents, and that are being raised by two moms and two dads. And some of those folks are my friends. And those families with two moms and two dads, we talk about the same thing as parents. We lament the large piles of laundry in our homes. And we talk about how hard it is, how much it hurts when we step on Legos. And we worry about the future for our children, and we want the best for them in their lives. We want the best for their happiness. And that's what we do because we're families. And families don't all look the same. And I truly believe that by working for equality today, we're saying that all families really do matter. And when we come together and decide to create policies that support all families, no matter what they look like, no matter whether or not they meet one small view of an ideal, we've done well for our state. So please vote yes today. Thank you.
Representative Radinovich.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I have to warn everybody, I'm about to say my piece here. And I should tell you that Radinoviches are well known for being emotional. And when we're under attack, I think we have a tendency to become stoic and resolute. But if you add a little bit of love to our gatherings and to our hearts, we're likely to turn into a puddle. And today my heart is beating out of my chest because I think it's at maximum capacity. My cup runneth over today. I'm so thankful to have been here today to hear this testimony. I think it's true what everybody said, that there are good men and women on either side of this issue, and they each approach it through the lens of their own experiences. And I today wanted to share the experience by which I approach this issue. When I was 17 years old, my mother was taken from me. I really struggled. I had a great deal of difficulty, but I had a strong family. I had brothers and stepsisters and dad and step-parents, and I had cousins, and I had best friends who were as close as brothers. And I also had one friend and mentor who went out of his way to care for me, to make sure that my emotional needs were tended to do very small and nice things to help me through that situation. And I went on, and for the next couple years it was difficult, but I got my life where I wanted it to be. I'm obviously happy to be here today. But about a year ago, or a year and a half ago, when I was thinking about running for this office, I had sat down with this friend of mine, and I hadn't connected with him in a few years. And he said to me, "Joe, I'm gay." And I didn't really even think much of it. It was fine with me. I've got plenty of gay friends. But when I was going home that day, I was in my car, and I actually had to stop and pull over because it hit me that through all of the difficult things that I had been through, where he was there for me, for 35 years, as someone who was in the closet, through all of his difficulties, he didn't have that same support for him. He didn't have that big, loving family. And in a small town, he had to be worried that coming out would possibly cost him his job or worse. And I know that might sound strange to people who don't come from small towns, but just today in an NPR story about this issue and about my vote on it, a gentleman from one of my towns, and I assure you that my towns are full of good people, but a gentleman from one of my towns said that he believed that all gay people should be rounded up and shot. And so that threat of coming out in a small town is real. And so today, I stand in appreciation of the work that Representative Clark has done. I stand in great appreciation of all the conversations we've had as colleagues over the course of this debate. And I just want to say that for me, this is a vote for freedom and equality. This is a vote for the rights of all of my constituents. This is a vote in the truest hope that every Minnesotan will someday be able to have a family like mine, a family that's there for them through thick and thin, a family that cries when they feel so much love in the room, that stands resolute when they face adversity. And this, for all of us, I hope, is a vote on the long march to fulfilling a promise in this country that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, that chief amongst them is the right to liberty, to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Members, I'm proud to say that I'll be a green vote on the board, and I sure hope that the rest of you will as well. Thank you.
Representative Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members. Just like Representative Radinovich, I come to this from a background of traditional marriage. And just like the Radinovich family, the Albrights wear their emotions on their sleeves. So I certainly appreciate where you're coming from. I wrote it down because I didn't want to forget what I wanted to say. So you'll excuse me if I read it off the paper rather than speak to you. Just know full well, members, and for those in the gallery, this comes from my heart. We gather in this chamber to do the work of the state and its citizens. I can only imagine the efforts and the sacrifices made of those who labored to place those pillars, who labored to plaster these walls, and to place the inscriptions over our heads. And now, for me, just as they do for all of you sitting at your desks, I think they take on a whole new meaning. From the beginning, our preordained order has been foundational to society, not just religion. The idea of one man and one woman creating a family and bringing children into this world with the love and support and the history of their ancestors supporting them as they continue along life's thread. On any given day, we come to this chamber and give thoughtful consideration to any number of issues. And yes, in some cases, we compromise to adjust to the needs of a few so that we all can live together. Some might say this is good. Some might disagree. Some might describe this as by using the word tolerance. This is where I have a hard time accepting the change to the way society has lived for centuries. When we, as we are talking about on this chamber, on this floor, endorse experimenting with the very fabric of civilized society, there will be consequences. There will be consequences intended and not intended to the very essence of who we are and what we will become. And for this, we should not be surprised. These are interesting times, members. In the course of our country, over the last half-century, the subtle and dangerous perception is starting to take root that government may very well know better about how to take care of you than you do. Who decides where and how to deliver your education? Who decides how to encourage economic growth or engineer our daily activities? Who determines living patterns and implicitly rewards that behavior? Who helps you to decide how to manage your retirement, your health, your family? Who might start supporting the ceremonies for the rites of passage through life? The culture of our founders who formed this representative republic is morphing into one that I dare say is a centralization of the state, where the government shares more and more in the discussions of our daily life to provide what is deemed best. We are substituting the wants of a few in order to tolerate the emotional inclusiveness that this debate is inviting us to. Let's not be overwhelmed for the sake of thinking we are making our society more enlightened. And we wonder why people are frustrated, losing hope, and becoming even more uncivil towards one another and their government. They see us spinning out of control, and they feel helpless. They feel powerless through the normal means to effect change. A vote today is the last endorsement on this issue. The endorsement of the people through their elected officials. Are you voicing your opinion or the opinion of your constituents? We have history to think on for a number of instances, and I think on the same debate 2 years ago on May 21st of 2011. And so I close with this from that debate. One of the members of this chamber rose and in their remarks gave pause to the meaning of courage. It was said that courage is something that is developed, that it must be practiced. Courage was the act of stepping out and doing what needs to be done when you don't know what the response is going to be. Sometimes, by disagreeing with the people that you need something from, or you've given something to. Members, as you contemplate your decision on this floor for this issue on this day, I ask you to have courage, to seek the wisdom of your Creator God, to recognize who you are, to consider your role for just such a time as this, in this, the people's house.
Representative Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This is a moment that I think we can all be proud to be members of the Minnesota House of Representatives and have this privilege. And if this debate has shown nothing else, it's shown and really strengthened the idea that there are good and decent and thoughtful and honorable people on both sides of this issue, on both sides. And I thank you all as colleagues for that. You've all demonstrated that here. So why are we here today? Well, one answer is we're here to talk about freedom and love and commitment between two people. But I think it's more than that. I think it's part of a history that is being written and will continue to be written after today. It's interesting to me that starting in the late 1960s and early 1970s, when gays and lesbians started being open and honest about who they were, the initial critique of them was their separateness, was their otherness, was the fact that, so the argument went, they wanted segregation on integration, a separate culture, separate enclaves, separate institutions. And now, decades later, the opposite is happening. Those gay and lesbian brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles and friends and colleagues and fellow citizens of ours, they are running towards, not away from, those institutions. They want integration. They want to lead our churches and temples and synagogues as clergy. They want to fight, and in some cases are willing to die for our country in the military. And today in Minnesota, as in the past in other states, and hopefully in the future, they simply want to be a part of the most loving and stable and nurturing institution that society knows. They want to be a part of that. They want to elevate it. They want to enrich it. And I don't think we should scorn that. I think we should embrace it. We should embrace their embrace. And I think that's what we have the opportunity to do today. I think slowly as a society we're coming to the realization, some faster than others, that those in the GLBT community do not have some sort of condition to be pitied or prayed away. What they have is a God-given orientation which should be celebrated and welcomed. And I think we have an opportunity to do that today as well. So this is about freedom and love and commitment. It's about live and let love, you might say. But it's also about compassion. And I know it's most difficult sometimes to be compassionate where the object of the compassion is someone who you maybe don't know. And you don't know who they are or what they hope for. But in that vein, there's a story I love from my own religious tradition about a rabbi who was meeting with his students in a religious school. And the rabbi asked his students the question, what is the precise moment when night ends and a new day begins? And one of the students said, the moment when night ends and a new day begins is the moment when there's enough light that I can tell the difference between a cedar tree and an olive tree. And the rabbi said, nope, that's not the answer. Another student said, well, Rabbi, I know the moment when night ends and a new day begins is the moment when there's enough light that I can tell the difference between a sheep and a goat. And the rabbi said, no, that is not the answer. The rabbi said, the moment when night ends and a new day begins is the moment when you look into the face of a stranger and see the face of your brother. Until that moment, no matter what time it is, it's still night. But at that moment, that's when the new day begins. I like the sound of that, a new day. I hope we can all go there together, and I urge you to vote yes.
Representative Daudt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members, and I most of all want to thank you for the thoughtful, respectful, and considerate debate that we've had here on the House floor. I very often think when I come here to work every day what a great and humbling place this is. And I think about the work that we do, and sometimes I think about how we do that work. And you know, what I've listened to in this chamber, not only today but in the past, has affected me in ways that have made me a better person. And I think that, you know, a couple of words come to mind during this particular debate. And one of those in particular, I think, has improved all of us, and that's our ability to disagree. But one of the words that sounds pretty similar, that I absolutely can't tolerate, is disrespect. So that's why I thank you for the conversation that we've had today, because I think disagreeing with each other in a civil way does make us better people, but we need to do it without any sort of disrespect, and we can't tolerate that, either in this chamber or in the hallways or in the streets in our communities. 2 years ago, nearly to this date, I voted to give Minnesotans a chance to weigh in on this very issue. We asked them to vote yes or to vote no on whether to define marriage in the Constitution as being between one man and one woman. This past November, we heard from Minnesotans on this issue. 47% of Minnesotans said they wanted to put marriage in the Constitution between one man and one woman. 53% said they did not. What we learned in November more than anything is that this is an issue that deeply divides Minnesotans. What we did not learn is that Minnesotans want us to redefine marriage. My message today is one of caution. If I made a mistake 2 years ago in the approach that I took, it was that I didn't consider both sides of an issue. I thought about what one side wanted, but I didn't fully consider and take into account in the solution that I put forward what the other side wanted. I fear that you're making that same mistake today. All of us represent constituents, and I know that in every one of our districts, I'm sure there's somebody on each side of this issue. So I know this isn't an easy decision for any of us to make, and I know that no one came to their decision lightly. But I fear at a time when half of the people are saying yes and half of the people are saying no, half of the people might be saying that this isn't coming soon enough, and the other half are saying this is coming too soon. I think it's our contemplative nature to come here to represent them and to decide when might be the right time. I'm not sure if this is the right move, but I do think this isn't the right time. I have some of my best friends are gay, and I know that many of us have friends and family who are gay. And I know that some of the people here are going to vote, as we've heard, for this, when their district might be saying don't vote for it. I think we have people that are going to vote against this when their district might be saying vote for it. But all of us have to make that decision on what we think is best, not for us, not for our individual situation, not for our religious beliefs, but what's best for the entire state of Minnesota. So I caution you again. History will determine whether this was the right move. But I think one thing that we all know for sure is that Minnesota really is divided on this issue. And I ask you not to forget the people on the other side of the issue. One of the things that I've strived to do in this chamber and in this job is to really understand those who I disagree with. And I ask that everybody, regardless of what side of this issue you're on, talk to the people on the other side. It'll help you understand more about them, and I think it'll make you a better person. Minnesota is still divided on this issue. Hearts and minds may be changing, but Minnesota is still divided. Now is not the time.
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I want to begin by saying hey to all the mighty citizens that are here with us in the gallery and out in the rotunda, and to thank Representative Daudt for such a respectful debate, and to the members in the House today for what has been a really heartfelt conversation. I also want to thank Representative Clark for all her work on this for so many years and bringing us to this point. Minnesotans have been on a journey for some time now, engaged in a conversation about granting same-sex couples the freedom to marry the person who they love. The conversation is rooted deeply in personally held beliefs about the institution we cherish, marriage, and today specifically we're talking about civil marriage. People have considered this issue and what it means for Minnesotans, and I have been, I will tell you, a witness to some of the best of Minnesota. And while we haven't all agreed, and we haven't always started in the same place, we have listened to each other respectfully, conversation by conversation, Minnesotan to Minnesotan. I have an excerpt from a letter from one Minnesotan who lives in the district I represent, and he gave me permission to read just this little part to you. His name is Philip Higgs, and he asked, I'm asking you to help ensure that all Minnesotans are treated equally under the law. Minnesota is my home. I went to college here. I shared my first kiss here. I learned to love coffee shops here, and I became an adult here. I've fallen in love here, and I want the opportunity to get married here. When I moved to Minnesota, it was the first time I had felt free to be myself since I was a child. For the first time in my life, being gay was just a facet of myself and not my defining characteristic. It's time that we Minnesotans, all of us, are recognized for our commitment to equality, our strength of character, and our sense of fairness. Since I was 18, he says, I have believed that Minnesota is a place where dreams can come true. It's been these conversations, these personal experiences, these stories of love and home that have guided us to this point today. I remember as a little girl playing with my mom's veil. I remembered that it was really lovely and sparkly when she let me put it on, which was rare because she didn't want me to mess it up. And even as a young girl, I knew it represented something more than something pretty to put on my head, that it represented the marriage between my parents. And something at that age, even at 5 and 6 years old, I already knew that that marriage represented something important in our society, and it was something that I hoped for myself one day. And as an adult, I was free to make that choice, and I did. And I'm not going to bore you with the details of me and Joe Faust or embarrass my beautiful daughters. Instead, I will tell you a story about something that hasn't happened yet. It's a story that's going to happen 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, and it'll happen time and time again for many Minnesotans. It's a story about a coworker. It's a story about your best friend. It's a story about your son, your daughter, or your grandchild. Let's say it's a story about Frances. You haven't seen Frances in a while. She gives you a call, and she wants to meet you in a coffee shop. You arrive first at the coffee shop, wondering what news Frances will share. Maybe something's wrong. But when she bounds through the door, she's beaming from ear to ear, and you know she's here to share good news. She can barely sit down before she blurts out, I've found someone special. I think I've found the person I want to spend the rest of my life with, and I really want to know what you think. And I think to myself, well, that's really big news. I want to ask Frances some questions. So I begin. Do you make each other laugh? And she says, every day, and we're best friends. And I think, okay. So another question. Do you pick each other up when you're feeling down? And she says, yes, we bring out the best in one another. And then I ask the hard question. Do you really love each other? And without hesitation, Frances says, yes, deeply and completely. And with that, I smile, knowing because that's the only question that needs to be asked. This is Minnesota, and everyone in Minnesota has the freedom to marry the person they love. That is the Minnesota I love, and with love, I'll vote yes. Thank you.
Representative Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members, and I just want to add my voice to those who have noticed how respectful this whole conversation has been. Really appreciate it. It says something about the quality of this body that means so much to me. And I do want to say that it's been a real honor to carry this legislation. So many people have contributed to it, both those who support it and those who've had difficulties with it. And so it's much bigger than myself, but I do want to just say a personal note, which is this is very important to me, and I'm so honored that my partner of 24 years is here. Jacqueline, I thank you for making it here. She wasn't feeling well earlier, but she's here, and she's deep inside in many ways. I want to thank Representative Faust. He talked about when you understand that you can't live without someone in your life. I feel really honored to have that part of my life. And I think what we're asking for here is just the basic right to expand the meaning of marriage and all the legal protections and rights and responsibilities that come with it. This isn't about bigotry, as several people mentioned. This is about honoring honoring difference. Representative Doubt, you talked about, really understanding people on the other side. And I want to say, I hope I've done a good job of really honoring and respecting the need for people who have a religious objection to marriage between people of the same sex. We tried very hard, and I think in 3 or 4 different places, put that into this legislation because I do respect the other side and the other point of view, and I thank all the people who helped with that. And some of you did in very specific words, help making sure we put the right words together. Others of you by just conversations. I have had the honor of talking with many of you about what this means to you, both pro and against. And so it really is a wonderful moment to be here. I do believe we are on the verge of changing Minnesota's history, and that I'm just grateful again to be part of it. I thought I would mention just maybe one major topic that came up, and several people talked about the children. There was the study cited by the one psychologist that Representative Gruenhagen mentioned. I just wanted to point out that in that particular study, what we now know is that there were only 2 of the 3,000 people who were interviewed there that were actually children who were raised by GLBT families. So it was much more about, it really was about how important it is to have stability in a relationship. And that's what this legislation will help. We are protecting many children, more than 5,000, Minnesota children who are now, whether you approve or not, are now parts of GLBT families, several thousand GLBT families. These children need the protection of the laws that we will be passing here today to make sure that they have the equal rights and protections that all families who are married have. I did want to say one special kind of bittersweet moment. Senator Alan Spears, served here in the Minnesota Senate for many, many years, and he was here. He was my chief author in 1993 when we passed the human rights law that included those words, sexual orientation. Alan passed in 2008, and I know those of you who know him know that he would be very proud. He would be very proud of the fact that we've taken this step 20 years later, and I just want to recognize and honor his legacy because he helped get us here. He was the first openly gay man who served in the Minnesota legislature. There were many things that individuals said that I found very inspiring, and I won't repeat too many of them because I want to respect our time here, but I will just say that when the words liberty and freedom were mentioned, I think that is something that is so important to all of us. And the liberty and freedom that we are talking about here is deep into this part of marriage equality. And I just want to say again, for those of you who object, we are not redefining marriage, but I would say that we are strengthening the meaning of marriage by opening it to couples who are committed, who have the love, the commitment, the responsibility that we all associate with the words marriage. So in closing, friends, I just want to invite you to say yes to marriage equality. And I recognize the courage and integrity of all of you, however you vote. I especially, though, want to thank those who I know are taking a very risky chance and have had some difficult things said to them about voting for this bill. And I just so much appreciate you. And again, I'm humbled to be the author of this bill and to carry it forward. And I urge you all to vote yes. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Clerk will close the roll. There being 75 ayes and 59 nays, the bill is passed and it's as amended and its title agreed to.